Reality had always been cruel, but this moment shattered everything Demon King Diaz believed in. He stood frozen, unable to accept what his eyes showed him. The black flames he had once praised as invincible barely touched the hero standing before him. Worse still, a sword had pierced through his chest, cutting past his iron-hard scales and embedding itself deep in his heart. The scene made no sense to him. Defeat was something meant for others, never for someone like him. From the very beginning, Diaz had been exceptional. He entered the Demon King Academy as the top student and graduated as its pride. No one had studied the Demon King standard more seriously than him, the sacred doctrine left behind by the first emperor. Diaz treated it as absolute truth. He followed every rule faithfully, constructing the tower, abducting princesses, and deliberately allowing heroes to grow stronger before facing him. According to the standard, the emotions of rage, despair, and hope were the finest nourishment for a Demon King. Killing heroes too early was wasteful. They had to be raised, sharpened, and matured before being consumed. The stronger the hero, the richer the reward. Diaz never questioned this teaching. He believed without doubt that the world would eventually fall into his hands. Over countless years, he absorbed the emotions of entire civilizations. With each battle, his strength grew until no Demon King before him could compare. And yet now, he lay collapsed on the ground, blood soaking into the dirt beneath him. As pain overwhelmed his body, Diaz let out a broken scream, demanding to know why this had happened. Nothing about his defeat made sense. His eyes trembled with disbelief, unable to accept the reality crushing him. The hero stared down at him with open contempt. To him, Diaz was no different from any other demon, disposable and predictable. He mocked the Demon King for being shocked by an ending that demons themselves created. Diaz tried to protest, but the hero interrupted him, explaining with cruel honesty that kidnapping a well-known princess was nothing more than an obvious signal. It was a formal announcement that a Demon King had begun his activities, and an invitation for heroes to respond. The hero continued mercilessly. Killing the human king, he said, would have been foolish. A dead king would only plunge the kingdom into internal conflict. Greedy nobles would fight among themselves, and the resulting chaos would never be directed at the Demon King. Without unified hatred, Diaz would gain no power. Such an outcome directly violated the very standard he worshipped. Ironically, by following the rules so strictly, Diaz had made life easier for the heroes. When they didn't come to the tower, demons sent monsters to villages, allowing heroes to train properly. And once they reached the tower, things became even simpler. The lower floors were always filled with weak enemies, perfect for leveling up and polishing their abilities. Regret filled Diaz as memories surfaced. He had been careful not to kill heroes too soon, convinced that restraint would reward him with greater energy later. At that moment, the hero yanked his sword free from Diaz's chest. A scream tore from the Demon King's throat as agony flooded his senses. Then came the final blow to his pride. The hero revealed the truth. When a tower became dull and unprofitable, the Demon King was simply killed. Another would rise, and a new tower would take its place. To the heroes, this entire world was nothing more than a carefully maintained hunting field. Laughter erupted around him. The other heroes mocked Diaz openly, thanking him for raising them so well. They didn't call him a Demon King anymore. They called him their godfather, the one who had helped them grow strong. Standing over his broken body, they joked about the valuable loot they would collect and praised the tower as the perfect training ground. Diaz repeated the word godfather under his breath, his mind unable to process it. Everything he had built, everything he believed in, was nothing more than a system for farming points. The hero admitted that Diaz had been powerful and that many heroes had died along the way, but even those deaths were dismissed. Their sacrifices only added to the hero's fame. As the hero prepared to end his life, anger finally consumed what remained of Diaz's reason. If this was the fate promised by the Demon King's standard, then it was worthless. He refused to die like this, mocked, used, and discarded. Gathering every last fragment of his strength, Diaz screamed his title into the world. Massive energy surged around him, warping the air itself. Before anything could take shape, the hero's blade flashed. Diaz's head fell. In his final moments, he saw the heroes laughing. Their faces burned into his vision as he swore vengeance with a glare sharper than steel. Beside him, the hero warned his companions not to damage the head, eager to claim the horns as trophies. Suddenly, sparks of strange energy burst from Diaz's corpse. Realizing too late what was happening, the hero screamed for everyone to retreat. The Demon King sacrificed the last trace of his life. A deafening explosion swallowed everything. As his life slipped away, a bitter truth finally became clear to Diaz. The Demon King standard was a lie from beginning to end. It was never a path to supremacy. It was a joke crafted by heroes, a script demons followed blindly while being laughed at. Regret burned through him as he wished desperately for another chance. If he could return, he would throw that cursed standard to the goblins and crush it under their feet as repayment for what it had cost him. Suddenly, a voice calling his name shattered the silence of the void. Diaz. His eyes flew open. Confusion overwhelmed him as he stared around in disbelief. Noise filled his ears, voices urging someone to hurry toward the podium. His heart skipped when he realized they were calling his name. Before he could make sense of it, another student tried to prompt him forward, only to be interrupted by the academy principal, who scolded Diaz sharply for being absent-minded on his own graduation day, especially as the academy's greatest prodigy. That was when Diaz noticed the red badge pinned to his chest, the proof of completing the Demon King Academy. His breath caught. He had returned, not just alive, but 15 years into the past, back to the very day of his graduation. As the graduates were instructed to step forward one by one, Diaz's mind raced. He didn't understand why he had been brought back, but one thing was painfully obvious. This was a chance he could never waste. A professor soon addressed him directly, announcing that Diaz, the top-ranked student, would lead the oath on behalf of the newly crowned Demon Kings. Before him appeared the glowing laws. The Demon King Standard. Rules he once knew better than his own heartbeat. Build a tower within your domain. Kidnap royalty. Spread chaos while leaving deliberate clues. Raise heroes carefully, harvest their emotions, and stack the lower floors with weak monsters so difficulty rises step by step. Once, he had memorized every line with pride. He had devoted his entire existence to executing those principles with flawless precision. Now he felt nothing but disgust. To him, those laws were no longer sacred doctrine. They were trash, tools that had guided him straight into ruin, turning him into nothing more than a puppet dancing for heroes. Standing there amid applause and ceremony, Diaz questioned the meaning of swearing loyalty to rules he now knew would destroy him. The thought of being forced to follow them again filled him with uncontrollable rage. His silence drew attention. The official called his name, instructing him to step forward and recite the great standard as tradition demanded. Instead, Diaz spoke and shattered every expectation. He refused. The word echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. Gasps spread among the graduates, none of them understanding what they had just heard. But Diaz did not stop there. His voice rose as he declared that he would never swear such an oath. He condemned the standard openly, calling obedience to it the most foolish and degenerate act imaginable. Then, before the entire academy, he announced without hesitation that those so-called sacred laws were nothing but garbage. The hall froze. Horror and disbelief spread across the faces of professors, students, and demons alike. No one had ever dared speak such words, least of all the academy's greatest genius. In that single moment, Diaz ceased to be their pride, and became, in their eyes, the madman of the century. Archduke Arcane slammed his palm against the armrest, fury flashing across his face as he declared that Diaz's offense warranted execution on the spot. Insulting the Demon King standards was a crime beyond forgiveness. However, after a brief pause, he restrained himself and chose to suppress the chaos spreading through the hall. Diaz's flawless record and terrifying potential could not be ignored so easily. With visible effort, Arcane announced his decision. Diaz would be given one final opportunity. He could retract his words and formally apologize to the demon world, or he would be dispatched to the Aran region as punishment. At the mention of Aran, uneasy murmurs swept through the crowd. That dimension was infamous, a burial ground where demon kings vanished one after another. Many graduates whispered angrily, questioning why someone who openly defiled sacred law was even offered mercy. To them, a simple apology felt laughably insufficient. The Archduke reinforced the severity of the threat, reminding everyone that Aran was the most dangerous region known, where countless demon kings had met their end. Before Arcane could continue, Diaz spoke. Cold, calm, defiant. He asked to be sent there immediately. The declaration stunned the entire hall. Diaz stated plainly that he would prove the revered standards were nothing but meaningless doctrine. For the first time, even Archduke Arcane was left speechless. His patience snapped. He roared in rage, condemning Diaz as a lost cause, and issued an instant command. Diaz would be deployed to Aran. All privileges normally granted to elite demon kings were revoked. No subordinates, no escorts, no resources. The dimensional gate opened, and with it came a final decree. Diaz was forbidden from returning to the demon world until Aaron was fully conquered. As he fell through the portal, Diaz accepted the outcome without resistance. This was the natural consequence of the chaos he had unleashed. It was then he remembered Aaron was the very land where the heroes who had slain him in his previous life resided. Even before his regression, he had chosen Aaron willingly, driven by arrogance and the belief that only the strongest challenge was worthy of him. Now he understood the truth. That pride, combined with blind loyalty to the standards, had led to his death. The sheer number of heroes in Aaron had turned the rules against him. When he finally landed, wings spread wide, the freezing winds of the Irgust Mountains greeted him. Snow blanketed the northern continent as he stood ready to begin again. This time, Diaz swore he would not repeat his mistakes. He would exploit the heroes' systems instead of being devoured by them. The timeline shifted back to before the graduation ceremony. Gordon Derrick was meticulously preparing himself, adjusting his attire with care befitting the Academy's top graduate. According to Demon World tradition, the highest-ranked demon was assigned to serve the strongest newly crowned demon king. This honor ignited envy among the second- and third-ranked graduates, who silently cursed their own shortcomings. Gordon felt no doubt. To him, all demon kings were formidable, but Lord Diaz stood in a class of his own. A once-in-a-millennium existence, a descendant of demonic dragons whose name history itself would preserve. Graduating in the same year as Diaz felt like divine fortune. His imagination soared, visions of conquering countless dimensions together, statues erected to immortalize a great king and his loyal aide. With burning determination, Gordon vowed to engrave his own name beside Diaz's in the chronicles of the demon world. Then reality struck. He remembered Diaz screaming before the entire academy, denouncing the standards as trash. The memory shattered Gordon's worldview. The foundation of his beliefs crumbled instantly. The sacred laws he revered rejected by the very king he idolized. Shock turned to disbelief, disbelief to horror. The image of Diaz he had worshipped collapsed completely. The scene shifted to the depths of the Irgust Mountains. Through heavy snowfall, Gordon trudged forward, burdened by oversized packs. Confusion and despair clouded his face as he questioned how everything had gone so wrong. Diaz froze when he noticed him approaching. He had been explicitly told no demon would accompany him. Yet here one stood. Recognizing Gordon, Diaz greeted him with genuine surprise. Unable to hold himself together, Gordon demanded to know why Diaz had done something so reckless. Diaz feigned ignorance, asking calmly what he meant. That only made Gordon explode. He shouted about the public insult to the standards, about their exile to Aaron, about the certainty of death awaiting them there. Diaz tried to ease the tension with mockery, joking that Gordon would pull his hair out from stress. Gordon screamed back that hair was the least of their problems. Watching him, Diaz couldn't help but compare this version of Gordon to the one he remembered from his previous life: calm, confident, endlessly encouraging. Back then, Gordon had insisted they could overcome anything together, even claiming he would have been disappointed if their assignment was Aaron. Now fear ruled him. Diaz understood why. The circumstances were different and the weight of uncertainty was crushing. He chose not to reveal the truth of his regression. Telling Gordon would only make him sound insane. After struggling to steady his breathing, Gordon finally lowered his head and apologized for losing control earlier. Reality had sunk in, and with it came acceptance. No matter how grim the situation, he was still a servant of the Demon King, and abandoning his duty was not an option. Regaining composure, he instinctively returned to what he knew best, the Demon King's standards. He reminded Diaz that the first rule demanded the construction of a tower, but stressed that it must be placed somewhere visible and accessible. A tower hidden in an unforgiving land would never attract heroes. Gesturing at the jagged peaks and roaming high-level monsters around them, Gordon warned that humans would never survive the journey here and urged relocation. Diaz refused without hesitation. He announced calmly that the tower would be built exactly where they stood. Producing the tower seed, he pressed it into the frozen soil and explained that it required the blood of a demon king to awaken. Gordon panicked instantly, accusing Diaz of trampling over sacred law and discarding the dignity of his title. Diaz responded coldly, reminding him that he had never sworn loyalty to the standards in the first place. Despite his harsh words, Diaz understood Gordon's reaction. For demons, rejecting the standard was like denying instinct itself. It was doctrine carved into their very existence. Diaz acknowledged inwardly that without experiencing death, or something equally absolute, no demon could ever question it. He sliced his palm open and ordered Gordon to listen carefully. Calling the Demon King standards nothing but trash, Diaz pointed specifically to Aaron as proof. His blood dripped onto the seed, which reacted instantly. A crimson beam burst skyward as a glowing magic circle unfolded before them. As the tower began its user recognition process, identifying Diaz of the Black Flame demonic dragon clan, he revealed the truth Gordon had never considered. Aaron was drowning in heroes. Humanity had destroyed so many towers that they learned exactly how they functioned. The so-called standards had long since been turned against demon kings, weaponized to farm them instead. That was why Aaron was littered with their corpses. With a bitter laugh, Diaz remarked that the rules should be renamed the hero standards, because they no longer benefited demons at all. The tower finished materializing, rising through the snow like a silent colossus. The two stood before it, dwarfed by its scale. Diaz gestured for Gordon to enter. Inside, the first floor was completely empty. Gordon frowned, nodding that normal towers were filled with traps, structures, and monsters from the very beginning. This one was bare, featureless, hollow, and lifeless. The emptiness continued all the way to the fifth floor, where even the Demon King's chamber lacked furnishings or defenses. Accepting that the tower's state could no longer be changed, Gordon shifted focus and insisted on following at least the second rule. He reminded Diaz that kidnapping royalty was essential, preferably someone close to the throne, to generate maximum hatred and emotional energy. After requesting permission to advise, he unfolded a map and pointed to the nearest kingdom to the Irgust Mountains, Kors. With renewed enthusiasm, he proposed abducting the highest-ranking princess in the line of succession to accelerate their growth. Diaz cut him off. To Gordon's surprise, Diaz agreed to the idea of kidnapping, but made it clear he already had a target in mind. Gordon brightened immediately and volunteered to assist. Instead, Diaz ordered him to remain behind and guard the tower, claiming the king's residence should never be left unattended. Gordon felt relieved, convinced that Diaz had finally regained his senses and that the earlier madness was nothing more than graduation stress. Then Gordon asked which kingdom they would strike. Diaz's answer stunned him. Hilderend, a nation in the far south at the greatest possible distance from the tower. Before Gordon could react, Diaz was already in flight, slipping through the window of a distant castle. He declared his target clearly, the 13th princess, the least influential, least noticed, and weakest of them all. As Diaz announced himself and seized her, Gordon screamed from afar in disbelief, realizing this choice violated the standards in every possible way. The princess stared at the intruder with clear disbelief, trying to understand who stood before her. Diaz made no effort to soften his entrance. Stepping forward, he announced in an icy tone that he was the Demon King and that she was being taken. Instead of screaming or begging, she let out a faint laugh, one so calm it felt completely out of place. Rather than fear, her eyes held challenge. She asked him plainly whether he was truly capable of dealing with her. The question caught Diaz off guard. For a moment he wondered if she genuinely believed Demon Kings were something to joke about. With unwavering confidence, he answered that of course he could. He was a Demon King. Her response stunned him. She agreed without resistance, stating simply that she would go with him. The lack of struggle made every instinct in Diaz flare. He immediately questioned her motives, demanding to know what kind of scheme she was plotting. The princess replied calmly that, as royalty, she had always known this day would come eventually. He warned her not to play tricks, making it clear that he would show no mercy, especially given his own desperate circumstances. She denied any conspiracy, pointing out the obvious. She couldn't plan for something she didn't know would happen today. Diaz admitted silently that her reasoning made sense, yet the sense of unease refused to fade. Cutting through his hesitation, the princess extended her hand and suggested they leave. Diaz lifted her without another word and took flight toward the Irgust Mountains. When he returned to the tower, Gordon greeted him with a mixture of anticipation and nervous tension. Diaz instructed that the princess be kept on the 4th floor instead of a dungeon cell, explaining that her cooperation earned her limited leniency. Gordon accepted the order, then requested a private discussion. Left alone on the fourth floor, the princess sat on the cold stone and whispered to herself that she had truly been abducted. She surveyed the empty room, no cushions, no blankets, no servants. There were no gardens, no music, none of the comforts she had always known. And yet, despite the bleak surroundings, a faint, unreadable smile curved her lips as she murmured that it wasn't as terrible as she had imagined. Elsewhere, Gordon presented Diaz with an invitation sent from the Tower of Monsters. It was a formal welcome for the newly arrived Demon King. Diaz scoffed, dismissing it as a thinly veiled attempt to intimidate him. He remarked that Demon Kings normally refused cooperation out of pride, but Aaron's brutal environment forced them to abandon that arrogance. After some thought, Diaz decided to attend. He admitted that he had previously ignored them, believing them insignificant, but now recognized the value of contact. The Tower of Monsters loomed deep within the forest when Diaz arrived. Inside, Draxon, the monster king who had ruled for 70 years, sat upon his throne, tearing into raw meat with savage intensity. Without rising, Draxon addressed Diaz mockingly, calling him the king who insulted tradition and remarking that he looked underwhelming. Diaz responded without emotion, asking whether Draxon wanted a fight or if there was a reason for the summons. Draxon laughed and revealed that Archduke Arcane had ordered him to keep watch over Diaz. Diaz replied with open contempt, insulting the Archduke as an irritating old vampire and remarking that exile to Aaron clearly hadn't satisfied him. Enraged by the disrespect, Draxon hurled a chunk of meat at Diaz's feet and ordered him to lick it. He claimed he would overlook Diaz's behavior if he complied. Diaz ignored the provocation, instead asking if Draxon truly didn't understand why he was here. Draxon answered arrogantly that he did, the punishment for mocking sacred tradition. Diaz cut him off, reminding him that those same traditions forbade demon kings from killing one another. Then he stomped the ground. The floor cracked under the force. Draxon froze. The power radiating from Diaz was nothing like what he had expected. Diaz sneered, questioning whether Draxon truly believed he still followed those rules. A crushing aura filled the hall, and Draxon realized his mistake too late. Stammering, he invoked Archduke Arcane's authority and demanded proof that Diaz had kidnapped a princess, threatening him with loss of status if no report was submitted within a month. Diaz interrupted calmly, saying he had anticipated that demand. He revealed that he had already taken a princess. With a tone laced in meaning, he added that she suited his personal taste perfectly. The statement left Draxon confused and unsettled. Without waiting for a response, Diaz turned and left the Tower of Monsters behind. Diaz returned to his tower in the Irgust Mountains without delay. Gordon greeted him with admiration, praising how he had asserted the dignity and authority of a demon king. Diaz brushed the praise aside, stating calmly that nothing remarkable had occurred and that Draxon would not dare escalate matters for now. Still, he emphasized that complacency would be fatal. Preparation was essential. He instructed Gordon to inspect the princess closely and determine how she could be used to their advantage. Despite his composed exterior, unease lingered within Diaz. The reactions of the other demon kings troubled him. If they chose to unite, the pressure would be overwhelming. Only then did he truly grasp how deeply his rejection of tradition had provoked them. Even so, he felt no regret. If time were reversed, he would make the same choice again without hesitation. He would rather die than kneel before a doctrine he now recognized as poison. This time, he would abandon shortcuts and rebuild his strength from the ground up. Diaz had assumed that abducting a low-ranking princess would yield little energy. It was a calculated, cautious move. Yet when he checked his accumulated points, his expression froze. The number had surpassed 13,000. For the first time since his return, Diaz was genuinely shaken. Before he could analyze the anomaly, a video transmission activated. The sender was the Tower of Monsters. Draxon appeared on the screen, offering formal congratulations to Diaz as a newly arrived Demon King. He spoke of goodwill and proposed sending a gift to smooth over their unpleasant first encounter. He even admitted that surviving and achieving results in Aaron was no small feat. With a thin smile, Draxon suggested that perhaps Diaz's mockery of tradition concealed something far more dangerous beneath the surface. Every instinct in Diaz screamed that something was wrong. Before he could respond, Gordon burst into the room, pale and trembling. He shouted that something was terribly wrong on the fourth floor. Diaz rushed after him and stopped cold. The once barren, lifeless floor had transformed completely. Lush greenery spread in every direction. Flowers bloomed across the stone, butterflies drifted through the air, and gentle elemental currents flowed naturally as if the space itself had come alive. The tower was undergoing naturalization, something that should have been impossible. At the center of this impossible garden stood the princess, calmly surrounded by elemental spirits. Diaz's mind raced. She hadn't merely altered the environment. She had created a self-sustaining ecosystem inside a magical tower. Only someone who had mastered all four elements could accomplish such a feat, and on the entire continent, there was only one individual known to possess that level of control. He confronted her immediately, stating that she could not be the 13th princess. She smiled knowingly and replied that she had expected him to mistake her for Alina. Stunned, Diaz demanded her true identity. With quiet pride, she introduced herself. Hernan Hildurin, the first princess of the kingdom of Hildurin. The revelation sent shockwaves far beyond the tower. Across the kingdom, panic and fury erupted as news spread that the first princess had been taken by the Demon King. In the royal palace, the king's wrath knew no bounds. He roared in fury, vowing to personally see the one responsible executed. Orders were issued immediately: summon the strongest heroes, mobilize the full army, and march without delay. The Demon King's head would be brought back at any cost. Amid the growing turmoil, the princess calmly reminded Diaz of the question she had asked him earlier, whether he was truly capable of handling her. She explained that this alone was the reason behind her strange confidence that night. Diaz replied that he had never been fooled by her outward appearance. He had long known of a prodigy, an elemental witch overflowing with mana, and such a presence was impossible to miss entirely. What truly puzzled him was how she had managed to conceal that overwhelming energy from his senses. In response, the princess raised her hand and revealed a ring resting on her finger. She explained that it was a royal relic, passed down through generations, capable of suppressing and hiding mana completely. She then asked him directly whether he planned to release her now that her true identity had been exposed. Diaz rejected the idea without hesitation. Returning her would reduce him to a joke. No kingdom would fear a demon king who immediately gave back his hostage, and without fear, harvesting demonic energy would become impossible. He made his decision clear: she would remain in the tower no matter the cost. At that very moment, the system registered a massive surge of hostility aimed at him. His demonic energy points skyrocketed uncontrollably, breaking past 19,000. Diaz immediately understood. The kingdom of Hildurin had identified him as the culprit. Whether she was the first princess or the 13th no longer mattered, the hatred directed at him would remain the same. He confirmed calmly that she was still his prisoner. Far away in the royal palace of Hildurin, the king issued absolute orders. The demon king was to be killed and his daughter brought home at any cost. However, his advisors hesitated. The identity of the demon king was still unknown, making immediate retaliation impossible. They proposed sending scouts first and urged patience. The king erupted in fury. He berated them for their hesitation, accusing them of standing idle while his daughter remained captive. One advisor cautiously reminded him of a recent incident involving a neighboring prince abducted by the demon king of lust, a crime that had united the world against him and ended with his swift execution by heroes. The advisor questioned why another demon king would dare repeat such an act after witnessing that fate. The room fell silent as the others realized the situation was indeed abnormal. The king concluded grimly that this could only mean the rise of a new demon king. Moments later, a soldier rushed in with urgent news. Traces of teleportation magic had been detected, leading north toward the Irgust Mountains. Shock rippled through the chamber. Those mountains lay in the far north, while Hildurin rested deep in the south. Back in the Demon King's tower, Gordon voiced his concern about the kingdom's inevitable retaliation. Diaz, however, smiled calmly. He was certain the army of Hildurin would never reach him. The path was treacherous, filled with deadly monsters, hostile terrain, and countless sovereign nations standing between them. Diaz had already calculated the political reality. No country would allow a foreign army to march freely through its borders. That left the kingdom with only one option: hearing a hero's guild. Forced to accept reality, the king ordered contact with the guild. Yet when the destination was revealed, panic spread through the headquarters. The Irgust Mountains were infamous even among heroes. None were willing to risk their lives in a land crawling with nightmare-level monsters. To them, the mission sounded like a death sentence. Exactly as Diaz had predicted. Heroes motivated by profit would never accept a contract with such overwhelming risk. That was precisely why Diaz had chosen this location. His foresight and understanding of Aaron deeply impressed Gordon, who found himself wondering how his master seemed so familiar with the region, almost as if he had lived there before. In Hilderin, the king roared in disbelief and rage. Not a single hero stepped forward. He demanded how such cowards dared call themselves heroes while abandoning a princess in danger. The advisors attempted to calm him, explaining that heroes in Aaron were different, far more calculating, valuing reward above honor, and refusing any mission that threatened their survival. Meanwhile, within the tower, Diaz reviewed the system store. The options were grim. Summoning even basic soldiers like skeletons required enormous energy, 10,000 points per unit. Other options included weakening dimensional interference, but all demanded resources he lacked. Building a proper army would take time he did not have. Seated on his throne, Diaz sank into deep thought. His current energy reserves were nowhere near enough to face an organized force of heroes. An old, familiar fear resurfaced, the same dread he had known in his previous life. To overcome it, he issued a sudden order. Gordon was to contact Draxon immediately. Diaz announced his intention to sell demonic energy in exchange for human currency. Gordon froze. He shouted in disbelief, arguing that demonic energy was the most precious resource of their kind, the foundation of evolution, tower expansion, and monster summoning. Trading it for worthless human money was madness. Diaz replied calmly that Draxon would pay an enormous price. More importantly, without that money, he had no way to stop the heroes with his current strength. There was something only human wealth could buy. As Diaz spoke, his gaze shifted toward a location near the mountains. The fortress city of Holton Work. Disguised as a lone mercenary, Diaz approached the gates of the city near the Irgust Mountains. The guards stopped him immediately, their expressions filled with suspicion. They mocked his recklessness, calling him insane for heading toward such a deadly region alone. Rather than waste words, Diaz flicked a single gold coin toward them. The metal clink echoed sharply. He gave them a knowing look and casually gestured for them to divide it. Their hostility vanished at once. Without another word, the gates opened. Inside the city, Diaz quickly realized he lacked local knowledge. He decided his next priority was simple: find someone who knew the region well enough to guide him. Not far away, inside the Crimson Falcon Mercenary Guild headquarters, laughter and alcohol filled the air. Members lounged comfortably, discussing whether it was time to leave the area. Their leader dismissed the idea immediately. According to him, the location was perfect. Soldiers and heroes fought monsters daily, while mercenaries like them waited safely behind to loot the remains. He scoffed at the idea of moving when profit came so easily. Their conversation drifted toward rumors of a demon king appearing in the mountains. One mercenary laughed it off, claiming it was nonsense. Demon kings, he said, always built their towers in places heroes could reach easily. Another mocked the story of the Hilderin princess being kidnapped, insisting no demon king would cross an entire continent for something so pointless. Someone else added that the Heroes Guild had already refused the mission, which proved the story was just a scheme to inflate prices. The leader agreed, muttering that greed made people invent the wildest lies. A voice spoke behind him. Diaz had appeared silently. The mercenaries sprang to their feet in panic, spinning around in shock. They demanded to know who he was. Diaz smiled faintly, remarking that they seemed unusually well-informed, exactly the kind of people he needed. He ordered all but one of them to leave. They answered him with violence. Blades were drawn and the room erupted into chaos. Diaz moved like a shadow, striking with terrifying precision. Each blow carried overwhelming force. One mercenary attempted a sneak attack from behind, but Diaz caught the hammer mid-swing with ease. The attacker froze in disbelief. Crossbows were raised, bolts aimed at Diaz, yet it made no difference. He hurled one massive mercenary into the others, crushing them like toys. Fear spread rapidly. The guild leader, watching his men fall effortlessly, whispered in horror that Diaz was a monster. Outside the building, surviving mercenaries shouted in desperation, questioning why they were still fighting and why exhaustion never seemed to touch him. When the last of them fell, Diaz stood before the leader. His eyes glinted in the dim light as he promised to spare the man's life in exchange for answers. Trembling, the leader agreed instantly, begging for mercy. Diaz asked for directions to the slave market. The leader guided him to an extravagant compound sealed behind towering iron gates. Inside, only human slaves were displayed. Diaz showed no interest. When the leader hesitantly asked if something was wrong, Diaz tossed him a heavy pouch of gold and asked if there was anything more exclusive. The man's attitude shifted immediately. He led Diaz deeper, toward a restricted underground section. As they walked, Diaz reflected coldly on how easily the leader had moved on after witnessing the slaughter of his comrades. In the end, humans and demons were no different. Humans chased gold, demons chased power. They descended into dark dungeons beneath the market. The leader pointed the way and stepped back. Diaz remembered Gordon's earlier confusion about his plan for human currency. This was his answer. He intended to buy slaves, not humans, but other races captured by them. His target was specific, an elf, known for unwavering integrity. Someone he could place among the heroes to quietly sow disorder and confusion from within. Far away in the kingdom of Hilderin, a hero arrived. Helen Cargill stepped into the royal court, where the king welcomed him with visible relief. The king expressed complete faith that Helen would accept the mission. The hero did not hesitate. He pledged to rescue the princess and return with the Demon King's head, declaring it his duty in the name of justice. Back in the depths of the slave market, the merchant asked calmly what kind of merchandise Diaz was looking for. Diaz responded by pointing directly at a restrained elf and stating that he would purchase him. He added casually that the mercenary would cover the cost. The mercenary's face drained of color as he protested in shock, but the moment Diaz glanced at him with cold, murderous intent, his courage collapsed. Swallowing hard, he stammered his agreement. Diaz ordered everyone else out of the chamber, saying he wished to confirm something personally. The merchant hesitated, warning that elves were dangerous and might lose control. Diaz waved the concern aside, stating that he would compensate for any damage if necessary. Standing before the chained elf, Diaz observed silently how humans had reduced a once proud race to pitiful captives. Feeling the demonic aura emanating from him, the elf lifted his head in disbelief and demanded to know why a demon would show interest in an elf. Diaz offered him something simple, revenge against humanity. The elf admitted that the temptation was real, but said he could not trust demons any more than humans. Diaz claimed he was different and proposed a contract. 50 years of loyalty in exchange for freedom and protection. He reminded the elf that 50 years was insignificant for his long-lived race and far preferable to a lifetime of humiliation in chains. The elf rejected the offer outright. He reminded Diaz that demons sought the destruction of the world tree, the foundation of the elves, existence, and the balance of the world itself. How, he demanded sharply, could an elf ever trust a demon king? For the first time, Diaz recognized the truth in those words. Asking an elf for cooperation truly was absurd. Without hesitation, he swore upon the Demon King's standards that he would never harm the world tree, a vow carrying absolute weight among demons, equal in sanctity to the tree itself for elves. In return, he demanded that the elf, Granada of the Maple tribe, swear loyalty to him for 50 years upon the world tree. Granada stared at him in disbelief. This demon behaved unlike any he had ever heard of. Still, he agreed on one condition. He demanded to meet the Demon King who had sent Diaz. At that moment, Diaz revealed the truth. He was the Demon King himself. Granada burst into mocking laughter. He dismissed the claim, scoffing at the idea that a Demon King would personally visit a slave market. Worse still, Demon Kings weakened the farther they traveled from their towers. With open sarcasm, he declared that if Diaz could prove his words, he would pledge loyalty for 100 years instead of 50. The world shifted. In the blink of an eye, Granada found himself standing on the 5th floor of a towering structure. Diaz calmly reminded him of the promise he had just made. Reality crashed down, and Granada finally understood this was no illusion. He stood before a true Demon King. As he explored the tower, Granada's confusion grew into irritation. The lower floors were barren, devoid of defenses or monsters. Even the 4th floor contained nothing but vegetation. He questioned how such a pathetic structure could withstand heroes, bluntly stating that Diaz would be slain within a year if this continued. His complaints ended abruptly. Diaz released a wave of crushing demonic pressure, forcing the elf to his knees and reminding him of their contract. Terror gripped Granada's heart as he realized the overwhelming power before him. Only then did another truth strike him. The tower stood deep within the Irgust Mountains, a land crawling with calamity-level monsters. Yet none had attacked them. They were afraid. Granada finally bowed to reality and swore his oath upon the great world tree, pledging 100 years of loyalty. Deep within, he hoped to earn his revenge through some dark mission assigned by the Demon King. Instead, Diaz gave his first order. Prepare a meal. Granada froze. Later, while slicing vegetables in the tower's kitchen, the elf questioned his fate in stunned silence. This was not the role he had imagined. Princess Hildurin soon joined him, cheerfully offering assistance, which only deepened his confusion. They gathered in the fifth-floor dining hall around a lavish table. Hesitantly, Granada asked who the girl was. Diaz answered casually that she was the first princess of Hildurin. Granada nearly lost his mind. He shouted at Diaz in disbelief for kidnapping the crown princess, then returned to criticizing the tower's hopeless defenses against the coming heroes. Diaz ignored him completely and ordered him to eat. He explained bluntly that this was the true reason he had purchased him, his exceptional cooking skills. The princess smiled peacefully as Granada sat there, drowning in confusion. Eventually, the elf asked whether he was meant to fight heroes on the fourth floor. Diaz shook his head. If heroes ever reached that point, the battle would already be over. They would have survived the Irgust Mountains. Diaz finally revealed his true intention. Granada would serve as a spy, spreading disorder within human society on his behalf. But before that, there was something else that needed to be done. Diaz explained calmly that he needed to evaluate the elf's capabilities. The statement made Granada inwardly laugh in disbelief, wondering what kind of test could possibly allow him to defeat a demon king within his own tower. Diaz then laid out the conditions. He would fight using only one hand and would not draw upon any demonic energy. If Granada won, the duration of the contract would be reduced by 50 years. Granada's eyes lit up. He accepted immediately, declaring that he would put everything he had into this duel. The fight erupted without warning. Movements blurred as both figures closed the distance in an instant. Diaz commented almost casually on Granada's agility, nodding that years of captivity had not dulled his body. He speculated that the elf might have absorbed mana from the fourth floor or refined his physical strength on his own, remarking that the fighting style suited an elf perfectly. Granada responded with overwhelming magic, proving he was far beyond an ordinary elf. He warned Diaz that choosing him as an opponent was a mistake. Roots burst from the ground, binding Diaz's foot in place. Seeing the opening, Granada felt victory within reach. With Diaz seemingly exposed, he launched a decisive strike, convinced he was about to reclaim 50 years of freedom. Then he felt it, a pressure so terrifying that his blood ran cold. Reality slammed into him as he remembered exactly who stood before him. Diaz calmly reassured him that he would honor the agreement, not using demonic energy and restraining his strength to avoid killing him. Panic overtook Granada as he tried to stop the attack. It was too late. A single punch ended the match. The scene shifted to the fortress city of Holton Work, home to the Crimson Falcon Mercenary Guild. This time, Diaz received a vastly different welcome. The mercenaries greeted him with forced enthusiasm, claiming it was an honor to see him again. Diaz stated his intention to hire them for a full year. Their leader accepted instantly and asked about the budget, while one mercenary muttered bitterly about how quickly their leader had started groveling before the man who had beaten them senseless. Diaz answered by dropping a heavy pouch of gold onto the table. The mood changed instantly. The mercenaries declared their undying loyalty, loudly boasting that devotion was their greatest virtue. Their leader smiled, already considering whether he should replace them with another squad later. Diaz then issued his next order. The man accompanying him would be joining their unit and would relay his commands from now on. The announcement caused hesitation until Granada stepped forward and introduced himself. The mercenaries' expressions twisted into sympathy when they noticed his bruised, battered face. Seeing that he had suffered at Diaz's hands as well, they welcomed him with tearful embraces, bonding instantly over shared trauma. Watching the scene, Diaz reflected that despite their rough nature, these mercenaries were seasoned professionals accustomed to surviving the Irgust Mountains. Replacing them would not be easy. He also recalled that only one hero had accepted the kingdom of Hildurin's request, Helen Cargill, the same hero who had slain the Demon King of Lust. Turning his attention back to the group, Diaz addressed them as their employer. He then revealed their first assignment. They were to gather every possible detail on the hero Helen Cargill. With that settled, Diaz returned to his tower, already planning his next move. He entrusted the matter of the hero to Granada and turned his focus inward. It was time to strengthen himself. Selling his demonic energy had left him with limited options. Normally, such energy would be used to reinforce the tower or directly enhance a demon king's body. Now, stripped of those resources, Diaz was forced to seek an alternative path. His thoughts settled on a rare treasure, the soul flower. A crystallized bloom formed through years of absorbing raw natural mana, the soul flower granted tremendous power to those capable of consuming it. Diaz reasoned that the Irgust Mountains were the perfect breeding ground. Constant mana storms, extreme climates, and roaming calamity-level monsters kept humans away, leaving nature untouched for centuries. Any soul flower growing here would have absorbed mana in its purest form. Compared to demonic energy, its effect was weaker, but still invaluable. He announced his intention to search for them. Gordon immediately objected, warning that wandering the mountains unprepared was suicidal. Finding such a flower was like hunting a single grain of sand in an ocean, and monsters would attack without mercy the moment an opening appeared. Diaz brushed aside the concern, stating that monsters posed little threat to him. However, he agreed that locating the flowers would be difficult without a powerful mana detection method. A soft knock interrupted their discussion. Princess Harnan peeked inside, a small blue slime bouncing atop her head. Both Diaz and Gordon froze in surprise. The princess slipped away cheerfully, playing among the elemental spirits drifting through the tower, clearly enjoying herself. She spoke excitedly, admitting she had been bored for days and reminding Diaz of his promise to let her decorate the fourth floor however she pleased. Diaz stared in silence. She had already transformed the floor entirely. The sheer audacity of decorating a demon king's tower as if it were her personal garden left him momentarily speechless. He wondered just how far she intended to go. Turning back to him with a shy smile, Harnan admitted she hadn't expected to be allowed outside the tower at all. She was simply happy to check on him. Without warning, Diaz scooped her into his arms and launched into the sky before she could react. Wind roared past them as they shot through the air. The princess gasped in amazement. From above, the world unfolded in breathtaking color. Sunlight spilled across clouds and snow-covered peaks. She murmured that she had never seen the mountains like this, having been kidnapped under cover of darkness. Watching the sunrise, she whispered about how vast the world truly was. Memories of her palace life surfaced, endless repetition, lessons, training, duty. She had always believed her life would continue that way until the end. With a quiet laugh, she remarked that she might be the only person alive to ever fly above the Irgust Mountains. Diaz ignored the sentiment and brought her focus back to the task. She asked him to call her by her name, pointing out that they would be spending a long time together. He agreed, but reminded her sharply of her status, threatening to send her to the underground prison if she didn't put her spirits to work. Harnan apologized at once and summoned her water and wind spirits to begin the search. Diaz expected it to take hours. It didn't. Suddenly, Harnan cried out that she had found something. He landed at the location and immediately noticed monsters circling the area. Someone or something had reached the flower first. A group of massive beasts emerged from the shadows. Diaz addressed them calmly, explaining that monsters were a demonic offshoot and ordering them, as a demon king, to leave the flower untouched and depart. They laughed, declaring that they answered to no demon and despised demonkind entirely. They threatened to tear him apart. Diaz let out a dry chuckle, admitting Gordon had been right. Expecting monsters to think logically had been his mistake. He decided to erase them. The beasts charged, roaring as they attacked to protect what they considered theirs. Flames erupted across the battlefield. Screams filled the air as Diaz burned through every monster that came near. One of the creatures shouted orders to target the weakest, pointing at Harnan. The monsters rushed her in a coordinated assault. They never reached her. Diaz unleashed scorching fire that reduced them to ash in seconds. Harnan stood frozen, recalling that even coordinated bull tribe orcs could bring down ogres, yet these monsters hadn't come close. When Diaz released a fraction of his true demonic power, the destructive force left her shaken. When the smoke cleared, only Diaz remained standing amid the corpses. In the snow, Harnan discovered a radiant, ruby-colored soul flower, pulsing with water and ice attributes. She stared at it in awe, marveling at the purity of its mana. Diaz stopped her immediately. He warned her not to be greedy. Diaz told Harnan that if she managed to find more soul flowers, he would give one to her as well. Her eyes lit up instantly, overflowing with excitement. Watching her reaction, Diaz remarked dryly that humans truly became lively only when rewards were involved. Unfortunately, despite exhausting herself in the search, Harnan failed to locate another flower. With no further results, they returned to the tower. As they traveled back, Diaz found his thoughts drifting toward her. She was, after all, the first princess of Hildurin. He muttered to himself that kidnapping her might have been a mistake, at least at first. Now, however, he began to see her potential. She could be far more useful than he had originally assumed. Not long after, Gordon approached Diaz with urgent news. Granada had contacted him unexpectedly. According to the report, the hero Helen Cargill had departed the capital along with 32 other heroes. However, instead of heading straight for the Irgust Mountains, they had chosen a different route. Granada explained that the heroes were following the traditional path, forming a stable party, taking on village quests, and gradually increasing their strength along the way. Gordon presented several counter-strategies, urging Diaz to review them carefully. To his shock, Diaz tossed the plans aside without even glancing at them. He announced a decision that left Gordon speechless. There would be no interference. No monsters, no traps, no staged obstacles. Diaz explained calmly that half-measures only benefited heroes, turning them into stepping stones for growth. This time, he would do nothing. He ordered Gordon to pass the message to Granada and instructed him to have the mercenaries accompany the heroes openly, earning their trust instead of opposing them. Gordon frowned, remarking that his master continued to ignore every known standard. He asked anxiously how Diaz planned to stop the heroes with such an incomplete tower. Diaz assured him the tower would be reinforced, but not through conventional means. Through a dwarf. Gordon reacted immediately, protesting that a demon king working alongside a human, an elf, and now a dwarf would become a laughingstock. Diaz dismissed the complaint with a scoff. He clarified that he had no intention of relying on the dwarf himself, only on what dwarves created best. Weapons. Magical artillery. Diaz revealed his plan with a cruel smile. Heroes, conditioned by centuries of Demon King standards, would expect weak enemies on the first floor. Instead, they would be greeted by rows of cannons. Gordon went silent as the realization sank in. Heroes would be completely unprepared for such a welcome. Shaking his head, Gordon admitted helplessly that this strategy was nothing like anything written in the standards. Suddenly, he cried out in alarm, knowing that another kidnapping is going to be attempted. The scene shifted to Wolfnir, the underground city of the dwarves. Deep within its forgelit halls, Roger Friedrich, the greatest blacksmith of his kind, worked tirelessly, hammering metal with unmatched precision. Completely unaware of the storm approaching him, Roger continued his craft, oblivious to the fact that he had just become the next target of a demon king who refused to play by the rules. As Diaz reached the city of dwarves, he remembered how, before regressing, he had felt countless times that he knew everything about this world. Yet it was still his first time visiting the city. It was a modern and mechanical marvel with an ancient touch. He entered a bustling establishment called the Midnight Inn and asked the receptionist about where he should go to commission a weapon and find the most outstanding blacksmith in the city. The receptionist was happy after taking the bribe that Diaz gave him, complimenting him that, for a human, the boy definitely knew how to talk business. Diaz already knew that dwarves loved money as much as the heroes did, and he was not wrong. The receptionist told him that he should head to the inside of the city, where he would see a huge hole. If he were to hop on the lift, they would check his details and then put him on the desired floor, as it was a two-step security method designed to identify intruders. Diaz, however, was straight inside the lift without waiting for verification. He did not wait for it and straight up jumped to the lowest floor without any fear. He was in the deepest room of the lowest floor, and as he opened the door, he knew that behind it was the city's best blacksmith, Roger Friedrich. Roger was slamming away at the anvil with his hammer like crazy, as raw energy erupted from his every smash. He was wearing fireproof goggles while he was busy making his new weapon. Even Diaz realized that the display of Roger's power was making energy seem like it was dancing, wondering if he was truly the best blacksmith. Diaz immediately moved closer to him, intending to quietly abduct him and take the dwarf away. But before this could even happen, Roger slammed onto the anvil and sparks erupted as the dwarf controlled the materializing fire, attacking Diaz within seconds. Even Diaz was shocked that the dwarf had sensed the small bit of demonic energy, wondering if this dwarf was actually a hero in disguise, as Diaz was engulfed in the controlled flames. The dwarf jumped and got ready with his hammer, slamming down with the intent to kill. Diaz was somehow able to block it, confirming his suspicion was right. The dwarf announced that he was a dwarfian hero named Roger, who was a blacksmith that also contained the power of the heroes, wondering how Diaz had dared to enter the land of the dwarves when he was a demon, knowing that Diaz would not leave the city alive. But hearing that, Diaz just laughed with an evil grin because he was not an ordinary demon, but actually a demon king. He spread his wings and grabbed Roger by his neck, purely carrying the wrath of the demon king. Roger was unable to do a thing. As the scene shifts, we see that someone was taking away Roger's hammer. Multiple dwarven soldiers came for the rescue, wondering about the noise that erupted inside the smithy. But what they found was that the fire was gone and there was no more smithing. They realized that Roger was gone, and it was the work of an intruder who had abducted the best blacksmith. They wanted to block all the exits and then search the facility thoroughly. Roger was already abducted by the Demon King, who dared Roger to say anything, threatening to kill him in an instant if the dwarf made a sound. At first, Roger thought that the Demon King was in the Dwarven Kingdom for the princess, but Diaz clarified that he was not interested in that, and instead, he informed Roger that he already knew that dwarven blacksmiths dig their own underground passage in the case of an emergency, and they were going to escape through that. Roger was not ready to believe a word Diaz was saying, knowing that the Demon King must be there for the princess. Roger had been living a quiet life until now precisely because he was too scared to fight with a Demon King, and he was now cursing his life, wondering why this had happened to him. The scene shifts. Diaz had another plan because the blacksmith was not talking. He decided to turn the tables not by threatening Roger's life, but his reputation. "You won't talk? Fine," Diaz stated. "I will simply spread rumors that the selfish hero Roger sold off the Princess of Hilderin to save his own life. If such a rumor were to spread all over the city, how do you think the other dwarves will see you?" Even restrained, Roger was not ready to let such rumors spread, knowing that the Demon King was truly a vile and evil creature. Roger knew that everyone in the city already knew he was weak at fighting, and if a rumor like that were to spread, then everyone would definitely believe it, and he was going to be tortured for the rest of his life. Knowing everything was in his favor, Diaz asked Roger if he was going to sell the princess out or come with him on his own 2 feet. Deep inside, Roger wanted to sell the princess out but did not want to get tortured. Just then, Diaz came closer to Roger's ear, whispering that he would be guaranteeing the dwarf's safety, as he was swearing on the Demon King's standard. Roger remembered that the Demon King's standard was practically the faith all Demon Kings worshipped, and there was no way that Diaz was going to break the vow he made to it. In that case, Roger decided to head to the underground passage and help him, immediately getting relieved that he was saved. They found Roger's secret passage, which was saved from everyone. Diaz was getting annoyed by looking at the back of Roger while it was constantly moving. The Demon King wondered how long he was supposed to be in this cramped place, watching the disgusting back of the dwarf. Roger told Diaz that it could not be helped because the passage was made for dwarves and not regular-sized humans or demons. As the scene shifts, we see that Roger and Diaz were finally out of the city. Roger thought that this was where he was free. As he had shown the underground passage to the Demon King, he was now on his own. But Diaz immediately spread his wings, wondering what nonsense the man was spouting. Roger was unable to believe that a Demon King was breaking the Demon King's standard. But Diaz straight up called the standards complete garbage, telling Roger that he did not give a damn about it with an evil smile. Roger was stunned, realizing what kind of Demon King he was, but it was too late. Diaz started walking to grab the dwarf, wondering what he should do with him. Roger thought that he should have just sold the princess out rather than getting into this situation, and he started blabbering that he was quite a useful dwarf, and no one could match him in weaponsmithing, and that he could craft any weapon that the Demon King wished. Diaz decided to play innocent, asking Roger if he was willing to work for the Demon King, even when he was a hero. Roger was now screaming as if forcing himself onto the Demon King, telling him to use the dwarf to his convenience, getting ready to even be his spy, because surviving was Roger's first priority. Now Diaz had all his cards in place. as he told Roger that he would have mercy if he swore his allegiance to Diaz. Roger thought that he had saved himself from a great catastrophe, thinking that the Demon King was dumb to think that the dwarf would obey him, because the moment he was out, he was done for, and then he would form a pursuit team for the Demon King, making him regret letting him go for the rest of his life. But as the scene shifts, we are back to the 4th floor of Diaz's tower. Roger was stunned. Gordon wondered how the Demon King could actually bring a dwarf, and a hero dwarf at that, but Diaz silenced his butler and suddenly received a call from the elf who had something to report. But even Granada was shocked when he saw a dwarf and decided to do his report later. Princess Arnon also wondered if the dwarfian hero was there to protect her, but she immediately understood that this was not the case. Now the dwarf was completely pale, wondering why he was in the tower when the Demon King had promised him his mercy. But Diaz explained that having mercy did not mean he was getting freedom. It just meant he was getting to live. He then revealed the flashback of how he had simply knocked Roger out and carried him to the tower, because it was the only natural course of action since the boy did not know about what Roger would do. Hearing that, Roger completely snapped and became insane, laughing loudly, which shook the whole 4th floor. Diaz wondered if the dwarf was just insane, or if he was really that happy to be the Demon King's subordinate. Roger was crying from the inside while still agreeing that he was really happy to be the Demon King's subordinate. Diaz told Roger that he was already going to get his first mission. The first mission was as Diaz had planned, which was to construct a large number of cannons on the 1st floor to destroy the heroes. The scene shifted to the heroes who were having a journey inside a preparation station. The elf, Granada, had infiltrated them, telling the Demon King Diaz that there was a rumor going on in the base that the new Demon King could use black flames, so the heroes were utilizing fire resistance equipment. Along with that, there was also a rumor that there were no demonic beasts coming towards the heroes because the Demon King was scared. Diaz heard everything and was happy to know that the heroes had not lost their killing intent yet, knowing that they would not be able to obtain anything from this journey, neither honor from battle nor wealth, because in the end, they would lose interest and the heroes would not be able to grow. Diaz knew that it was a battle against time, and as there were no immediate problems, he cut the call after telling the elf to keep monitoring them. The high elf, Granada, wondered how Diaz was weakening the heroes by not sending out demonic monsters. But he realized that this Demon King was very knowledgeable when it came to human nature, wondering if there had ever been a Demon King like him before. Granada was kind of glad that Diaz was not his enemy and only hoped to serve him well. Meanwhile, inside the tower, Diaz told the dwarf Roger that there was one restriction for him. He could not use mana stones. Diaz did not care how Roger would remodel the 1st floor, as long as he abided by this one restriction. But the dwarf knew that a trap without a mana stone would not work on the heroes. Diaz explained that heroes were already super powerful, and their ability to sense energy was outstanding. So if the dwarf were to create traps using mana stones, the heroes would figure it out before the traps could activate. As the blacksmith hesitated, Diaz was serious, wondering if he had really brought the best blacksmith with him. Because if he had made a mistake, then he had no choice but to bring someone else into the tower, and that meant that Roger would have to say farewell. Roger realized there was no way to get out of this, and stammering, told the Demon King that there was a way. He explained that he had invented a magical tool that could hide the traces of mana, and it took 3 years to create. But he also had one in his workshop right now. Diaz knew that this was the only excuse the dwarf could think of to escape. Roger started crying, trying to convince the Demon King that he was serious, and even Diaz decided to trust the dwarf. But just then, Diaz put something around the neck of Roger, telling him that it was a magical tool that could separate his head from his body, and that Diaz could activate it with one hand and with only one gesture. This magical tool also hid the face of the wearer and worked as a trap. So if Roger tried to take it off, Diaz would consider that the dwarf was escaping, and he would immediately gesture toward execution. Roger promised that he would never take it off while his face turned pale. Now, Diaz started traveling to several kingdoms along with Roger to gather supplies and unique materials. It took him roughly a month to gather all the materials that were needed and to store them inside his subspace pocket. After that, Diaz returned to the city of dwarves. We see that Roger broke through into his own workshop by the secret passage, just as the scene shifts. A table was being broken onto the head of a dwarven soldier, as Princess Louise was getting angry by the fact that it had already been a month and a half, and they had simply not found Roger yet. The princess wondered how incompetent they were, and how much longer she would have to wait and remain patient. The soldiers informed the princess that the blacksmiths had dug out too many tunnels, so now they were investigating each and every one of them. But it was still highly likely that the kidnapper had already left the place. The princess already knew this much, and her fury raged on as she told the soldiers they would be stupid to still be present when Roger had been kidnapped. The princess grabbed the head soldier by his neck, lifting him up and telling him that he had 2 more weeks, and if he did not find the kidnapper by then the head soldier was going to be finished. The old man promised the princess to find them, and he was thrown away. Louise told everyone that they should go and fill all the tunnels that the blacksmiths had created. The soldiers ran outside the royal palace while the princess became bulky and turned around, looking at a piece of unfinished sword, knowing that this was supposed to be her weapon, which was being made by Roger before he was kidnapped. Now the princess had a devilish grin on her face, who hoped that Roger would be alive because he could not die until he had completed her weapon. But suddenly, from behind the princess, came Roger from one of his secret passages. The princess turned around, looking innocent once again. Even when Roger looked at her, the face recognition interfering mask was in operation. But the princess was too sharp, knowing that this was one of Roger's secret tunnels, and as only he knew about it, then he was Roger and no one else, even when his face was covered. Roger realized that the face distortion was not working while the princess got ready for a fight, thinking that Roger had gone into hiding because he did not want to make her weapon. Even when Roger knew that this was a misunderstanding, the princess was not ready to listen at all, asking Roger how he dared to insult her, who was the princess of the kingdom, promising that from now on, Roger would be her slave and would make weapons for her for the rest of his dwarven life. But before that, the princess was going to punish him for running away as her equipment started glowing in a golden color, and she got ready to punch. Roger screamed at the princess to spare him. Just then, a purple explosion took place from the secret tunnel, blinding everyone from the intense light, while the princess wondered who the hell dared to interrupt her. We see that it was none other than Diaz, also wearing the same mask, and telling Roger to get the equipment that he needed. The princess wondered who the hell he was and why he was helping the despicable dwarf. But Diaz introduced himself as the master of the pitiful blacksmith that the princess was extorting. But Louise was not going to fall for that, telling Diaz that Roger would be her slave and was going to make her weapons forever, and that Diaz was no one to take him from her. Both the princess and Diaz clashed. As Diaz attacked, the princess was shockingly able to grab the attack midway and counter without much problem, sending the Demon King flying away. She thought that now it was Roger's turn. But before that, Diaz got back into action and grabbed the head of the princess, slamming her multiple times onto various places and still fighting continuously. Diaz knew that Louise was the princess, and even when she was not a hero, she was exceptionally strong. Before Diaz had regressed, Louise was one of the strongest and was way stronger than she was right now. Diaz knew that he could defeat her before she got to grow, but then he would have to use all his strength and demonic energy. He was also not as strong compared to before he regressed because of the hero's fear. There was also a possibility that Diaz might get captured by the princess's soldiers, and since he had already used his powers, somehow Louise must know that the boy was the Demon King, which was pretty annoying. The fight took place between them, while we see that Roger was grabbing some wires and pulling them like his life depended on it. Diaz wondered if Roger had got everything, but he was still dismantling the machine, which was huge even in front of Diaz. This machine was the Mana Phantom, which hid traces of mana and was extremely large in size. Diaz was greatly annoyed after looking at it, telling the dwarf to finish it within 1 minute. Roger promised that he was going as fast as he could. But now the princess was having an even more devilish aura around her as she started coming towards the Demon King with a devilish smile. Diaz knew that if push came to shove, he would have to leave Roger behind for all the torture. This worked as negative motivation for Roger, who decided to wrap the machine up very quickly. Diaz had no idea how long he would be able to last, because with his restricted strength and mamonic energy, things were getting pretty hectic, while Louise was just charging her equipment again and again and clashing with the Demon King head-on. Somehow, Diaz was able to counter her attack, but he wondered how long he could do so. The princess knew that she could not let the stranger leave the palace alive, and commanded Roger to break his legs so that he could never escape again. But Diaz was shocked, telling the princess that now she was sounding like a Demon King instead, telling her to give up because Diaz was sure to take the blacksmith and the equipment with him. Just then, Roger screamed at Diaz that the dismantling was complete. In between the flash, the princess started screaming with a distorted look that Roger should come back to her and make her weapon. This anger created an opening that Diaz immediately noticed, kicking the princess away while being the beacon of equality, telling the dwarf to dodge the upcoming attack and get out of the way. The Demon King immediately opened his subspace pocket and grabbed the piece of equipment, which was as large as a room itself. The princess was getting angrier by every passing second, now not even identifiable, while she told the Demon King that his attack was useless against her. But then she saw immediately that the machine was gone, and there was nothing there. Just then the soldiers also came running inside the room, and the princess started abusing them for being slowpokes, wondering if they were going to come into the room after the princess would have died. She heard nothing and told the soldiers that, as Roger had run away, they would have to chase him through the tunnel. But that tunnel was immediately destroyed, just as the princess finished her sentence. The princess was innocent once again, wondering if Roger had blocked the tunnel, and if he really did not want to make her weapon that badly. But now, once again, the psychotic personality was taking over, who was having a smile creepier than a demon. The lady decided that she would personally search for Roger, even if she had to scour the entire continent, and then she would definitely make Roger regret what he had done today.